I'm testing this real quick. Can everyone hear me good? Not? Thank you. Who said that? Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's really awesome when someone speaks up or volunteers. It shows courage and bravery, but it also shows commitment and service. And we come to know that a volunteer has one of the greatest and best parts. I'm talking about World War II. And in World War II, we find that a nation that just came out of a Great Depression volunteered many to go to a different country and fight for freedom. And actually fight for freedom that was about to be taken away, not just in our country, but around the world. We've seen men that went through fire. And I'm not talking about a physical fire, I'm talking about a spiritual fire, hypothetically speaking too, because these men, they weren't offered great pensions like they have today. They went so that we wouldn't get attacked here in our homeland again. Now, I say all that because there's a character in Genesis, and it's going to start in chapter 37. That's where our main text is going to begin, and we were going to talk about. And I'm talking about a man named Joseph and how imperative he is to the story. Sorry. Let me fix that real quick. My mic fell. That's what happened. I'm so sorry. But you have to roll with the punches sometimes. Alright, if it sticks out, just sorry about that. Where was I? The story of Joseph is imperative to the story of Christ and the scheme of redemption. But before we go into that, I want to talk about one word. And I want to talk about something that everyone goes through. And this one word can either break you or it can turn you into something good, better, beautiful. Or it can melt you and destroy you. And it's hard to come back from that. But fire, what does fire do to you? Now, I happen to be very blessed and grew up with a firefighter in the house. There came a time when my dad, he went to school, got his EMT, paramedic, pharmacy tech, and he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do in his young life. And he said, I'm going to go to the fire department. And he did. And it was cool. And it was awesome. My dad worked 24-hour shifts, so there were times when he wasn't home, but when he came back home, it was awesome. It was the best. I grew up with a dad who taught us how to play baseball. He took us bowling. He at the time, we would play baseball in a field next to our house. Speaking of that field, it is no longer here. And if you have a chance, please say hi to some of our guests. I have a friend and her boyfriend. They're here visiting. She's also my sister's best friend, Eileen. And her house is now on top of that field. But we used to play baseball all the time. And my dad, when we were young, I want to say I was about 12, 13, 14, would do fire drills on Saturday. And our main focus was to get out at all costs. And Dad would do fire drills. And I remember Alyssa was young. And Brian and I were like, Dad, what about Alyssa? What are we going to do? And my dad says, don't worry, I have Alyssa. And growing up with a firefighter, I remember sometimes my dad would come home smelling like smoke. And I knew where he was at. And there were some times when he would come home and he would tell us these crazy, great stories. But what I loved about my dad is he included us in his life. Now, firefighters stay overnight, but when he moved to the airport, he became an airport firefighter. There's an exact title. I don't remember the name of that. I think it's called ARF. ARF. And when he stayed there, we would have dinners over there, lunches. We spent Christmas days, Thanksgiving, weekend celebrations. And I have an uncle who's not my uncle, but he went through the fire academy with my dad, so I call him Uncle Joey. And if we ever needed anything, he'd be there like that. And it was amazing because I saw my dad grow up, become responsible, active, provide for his family, not just with monetary possessions, But my dad was there all the time, with his job, with his life, and with us at home. And it was amazing. It was cool. And growing up, I wanted to be just like my dad. Firefighter, big, strong, wears the helmets and stuff. I used to go try them on when I went to the fire station and pretend I was like a Power Ranger or something. But watching my dad go through fires in his life was amazing. And he even taught us what to do in situations at hand if we were ever to come about a fire. But the word fire can be applied to many things. We see a lot of Bible characters go through fire, go through things they know are going to be hard, things that are going to be difficult. And it made them better men for it. And they allowed it to happen. You see, when fire burns, we say, ouch, we don't want to do it again. But when we understand what fire does to some things, it can make it hard, shiny, beautiful, or it can destroy us. Let's open to Genesis chapter 37. This is the story of a young man named Joseph, and he's known as a dream interpreter. And he is the youngest brother at the time in chapter 37. But the story doesn't begin there. I'm going to be reading Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through verses 1 through 3. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And you and all the families of the earth shall be blessed." In order to go to that land, it was going to take a few hundred years. And this is a land that they're not going to get to until after Exodus. But in order for them to go, things must be done. And God sets up a plan. So if you would go to me to Genesis chapter 37, we're going to be reading verses 1 all the way to verses 11. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, and his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them, to his father. Let me turn the page, I'm sorry. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. Israel, we're talking about the father, not the actual place at this time. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the other brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed." Verse 7. There they were binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheep arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all around me and bowed down to my sheep. And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his works. Then he dreamed still another dream, and told it to his brothers, and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come down, bow to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. What's going on with Joseph is he's becoming a prophet. And he is getting ready to be destined for something greater. But you see, when we don't sit back and think and analyze what's going on, his brothers had it in mind that, he thinks we're going to serve him. He thinks we need to bow down to him. He thinks he has authority over us. How is he able to have authority over us when his brothers are in the field working hard? And he gets to be inside, be in school. He has a nice coat. He doesn't even work. And he's getting all these things. And it's really easy to be envious. We see better cars. We see better houses. We see people with better jobs. Are they better jobs, or do we deem it better? Because deeming something is a choice you make. And at this time, the brothers are just tired. And they're not getting any rewards. They're not getting anything pretty. And so they're going to envy Joseph. Let's go to verses 12. Genesis 37, verse 12. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock into Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Then he said to him, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron and went into Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? So he said, I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And so Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. And now they saw him afar off, even before he came near them. And they compromised against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Basically just mocking him. But what's significant is, look, this dreamer is coming. It's really cool to understand that this is a foreshadowing of his future. Joseph of many dreams. Verses 20. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. And we shall see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And let us also remind ourselves that this is Reuben, the oldest brother. Verses 22. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness. And do not lay a hand on him, that he might devour him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry them down to Egypt. And so Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Verses 26 and 27. So Judah said, what profit? I'm astonished because this is where Jesus comes from. This is the tribe where he comes from. The tribes have not been established. So all of Joseph's brothers become the tribes. And we find that out after Exodus in the book of Numbers as they wander through the wilderness and are getting ready for war. And this is why Joseph is chosen, to preserve the seed, to preserve the promise in Genesis chapter 12 that he promised your seed will come from here. Let us continue. Verses 28. Then the Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. And he returned to his brothers and said, the lad is no more, and where shall I go? So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of goats, and dipped the tunic in blood, developing a crime scene. And he recognized it and said, is this not my son's tunic? A wild beast has devoured him. And without doubt, Joseph is torn into pieces. Then Jacob tore off his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, For I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him to Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. His brothers didn't just sell him. His brothers just didn't tell him into a pit. They conspired and they plotted against Joseph and his family. You got to be kidding me. Why would brothers do that to one another? Now, the miraculous thing is, Joseph knows this has to be done. Joseph knows he has to go to Egypt. Joseph does not rebuke. So when I ask, what are the fires we go through in life? Joseph right here in chapter 37 is going through a fire. And his brothers, whom are supposed to protect him and love him, they don't just make up a plot. They make up an evil plot, and then they bring it back to their father. And they don't just say, look what happened. They watch him mourn. They let others go comfort him. And it's all a lie. I say this dramatically because this is what Joseph had to endure. And while in the beginning of chapter 37, his brothers envied him, but his father stopped and thought about it, well, his father knew Joseph is chosen by God to do something. Chapter 38 is about Judah and Tamar, where we're going to go now to chapter 39, the continuation of where Joseph's going to be. Chapter 39. I'm reading a little fast so that we can cover a majority of the text. Chapter 39, verses 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. Now it's important to emphasize that he is the captain of the guard. This is right next to Pharaoh. Let's just say Pharaoh king, so that we can establish that this is the height of the world. This is Pharaoh. This is the king, and he is captain of the guard. So God is putting him in the perfect place to be safe. And even though he's a slave, and even though he's not with his family, and even though he lost a lot of things, God keeps Joseph safe through the fire. Verses 2, chapter 39. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian, Potiphar. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had put under his authority. Now let's recognize that an Egyptian who's on top of the world, no one messes with these guys. This is kind of like the Romans of that time, recognizing that God is with Joseph, despite everything that just happened. Verses 5. So it was from the time that he had made himself an overseer of his house that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that had in the house and in the field that the Egyptian owned. Verses 6. Thus he left that and had in Joseph's hand, and did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. Casting eyes. I kind of just say that she has wandering eyes for like a modern day translation. He has wandering eyes, and Joseph's handsome. And I'm not surprised that Joseph's handsome. This is a man of God, but he's also being raised by Egyptians, and they lacked nothing during that time in age. Verses 8, But he refused and said to his master's wife, Look, my master does not know what is with me. Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. And so when she says, Lie with me, Joseph is refuting everything, saying, Let me tell you why this is not going to happen. But it gets even better. It gets even better not just for Joseph, but to the Lord, his God, our God. Verses 9. How then can I do this wickedness and sin against God? Joseph says. So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed her to lie with her. or her to be with him. Verse 11, but it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do work, and none of the men were there to look, that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. He left his garment in her hand, and he fled and ran. She basically tore off his clothes and said, lie with me. This is a woman who's trying to get everything she wants by attacking him and his clothes. Verses 13, and so it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. She called him in Hebrew in verses 14. This indicates that she knows what kind of man he is, and yet she still attacks him. But what's even more important is that Joseph still holds fast to God. And even though Joseph went through everything he went through with his family and was at the height, at the captain's guard, God is at the forefront of his mind. Joseph is going through the fire. Verses 16. So she kept his garment with him until her master came home. Then she spoke to him with the words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to mock me. And so what happened is I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was when his master heard these words, which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all that the prisoners were in the prison. Whatever they did, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. The Lord made it prosper. The Lord was with him. The Lord was always with him. We need to put that in our minds, that the Lord is with Joseph right here in this text. Verses 40. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended the Lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in the custody in there for a while. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt were confined in the prison and had a dream, both of them, each man to dream one night, and each man to dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody of the Lord's house, saying, why do you look so sad today? And it kind of is funny that he's asking, why are you so sad today? Joseph is in prison. Joseph has gotten everything taken away from him, but he's still thinking about others. Verses 8, and they said to him, we each have a dream, and there is an interpreter of it. So Joseph said to them, do not do interpretations belong to God? Do not every dream and interpretation belong to God? I'm sorry, I'm talking fast. I'm going to slow it down. Then Joseph said, tell them to me, please. Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, behold, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. Though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into the Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation of that dream. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, according to the former manner when you were his butler. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me, and make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me into this dungeon. And when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and there were three white baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket were all kinds of baked goods from Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket of my head. So Joseph answered and said, this interpretation is this. The 3 baskets are 3 days, and within the 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat from your flesh. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, which Pharaoh was having a birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and lifted up the head of the chief butler of the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the butler of his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Joseph has been forgotten again and again. But now we're understanding that the dreams which he was having with his father amongst his brothers is coming to fruition. And we're understanding why Joseph was chosen by God. We're going to skip over to verses 37 in chapter 41. So Joseph's interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams has won him not his respect, not that he should be back as a favor within Pharaoh, but that he is a man of God. Verses 37, Joseph's rise to power. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this man, and whom is in the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all these, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word, in regard to the throne which I will be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And so he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, and he gave him a wife. Her name was Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt, being in charge of everything. Joseph is an archetype of Christ in Genesis. It's really cool that Joseph is 30 years old when he begins his actual work. And Jesus Christ began his ministry when he was 30 years old, that time in the New Testament. For time's sake, we're going to go to chapter 42. Chapter 42 is when he sees his brothers again. And this time he's not recognizable though, because he looks like an Egyptian. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, why do you look at one another? And he said, indeed, I have heard to that place and buy for us there that we may live, because there is abundance in Egypt. Verse 3. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. They're scared something's going to happen to the younger brother because of the sins they have committed. The dreams that Joseph had were dreams of famine. The reason Joseph is having these dreams is so that he can save his brothers to come to Egypt and save Judah, the tribe which Jesus comes from. Verses 4. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers before he said, let's save us the trouble just in case something happens. Verse 5. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in Egypt, in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold all the people of that land. And Joseph's brother came and bowed before him with their faces on the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them and said to them, you were spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, Lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of the man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, It is I who speaks to you. You are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Now Joseph gets angry. But what just happened is his first dream became real. His brothers called him, Lord, we are not spies. And they're bowing down to him. They're bowing down to him. But the humanity inside Joseph is he's angry, he's mad, he's starting to remember, and his feelings are coming back. But Joseph, being a man of God, says, let's put them to the test. Bring back Benjamin. He's never met Benjamin. He doesn't know Benjamin exists. He thinks his brothers are lying. And so he tests them. Let's skip over to verse 25 in chapter 42. Then Joseph gave command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was, in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, My money has been restored, and there it is, in my sack. Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, What is this that God has done to us? Then they went to Jacob their father into the land of Canaan and told them all that had happened to them, saying, The man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us, and took us for his spies of the country. But we said to him, We are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, Father, By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for your famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men, and I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Then it happened as they encamped in their sacks, that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And they and their father saw bundles of money, and they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me. Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. But in him my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any calamity should befall along the way in which you go, then you will bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. So now Joseph's brothers' sins are catching up. And in chapter 43, Joseph's brothers return, and Joseph sees his brothers. And Joseph is still angry. But Joseph didn't do it out of anger. He wanted to see if his brothers were honest men. They bring back Benjamin. He recognizes Benjamin and recognizes that Benjamin looks kind of like him. And I kind of wonder what was going through Joseph's mind. He sees that his brothers protected Benjamin. How come they didn't protect me? Joseph sees that his brothers' hearts have changed. At least he's happier for that. But Joseph also understands that the fire he went through was to save his brothers, even though his brothers did not save him. And he let the fire burn him. And that fire put him in prison. The fire made him wise. The fire made him patient. But the fire put him right back on top. And the fire put him to the point where he saved an entire generation. And in class, when we went over this, kind of says, can you believe that if Joseph wasn't here, we wouldn't be here today? Can you believe that if Joseph wasn't here and went through that fire, we would not have salvation? Can you believe that Joseph is actually not one of the tribes of Judah? Joseph's not. He's not one of the tribes. But he was used to save the tribes. Joseph went through the fire. He did not complain. He got hurt because he saw his brothers. But he knew God was with him. So when we go through our fires in life, do we understand that God is with us? And do we understand that God has to be at the forefront of our mind, no matter what position we have? Yes, I may be a custodian today, but what is the purpose of me being a custodian today? Or yes, I may be an assistant, but what is the purpose of me being an assistant? Yes, I may not have all the money in the world, but what do you actually have? Joseph didn't have any of those things that I just mentioned. Joseph didn't have a royal family. He got sold into slavery. Joseph's master didn't save him, and he was honest. He got thrown into prison. Doesn't have anything. Joseph saw his brothers come back. Joseph did not take revenge. Joseph did what God wanted him to do through his dreams. So we come to find a character who is known as Joseph of many dreams, or Joseph of many colors. All the bad that he had to go through were not bad things. They were good things. They made him a man of God. They made Joseph a servant. And this is the part that's kind of interesting. Go to Exodus chapter 1. Now we know that Exodus is about the bondage of the children of Israel, and they were enslaved. And this is where we come to find Moses and the burning bush and his brothers and the departing of the Red Sea. Great things that happened in our Bibles. But all that would not have happened without Joseph. And you see, we're just in book 1 of the Bible. We haven't even gotten into book 2. Many great things are in Genesis. We're going to go through verses 6 all the way through 10. And this is Exodus chapter 1, verses 6. And Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful, and they increased abundantly, and multiplied and grew mighty. 3 things have happened. And the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. Because they did not know Joseph, the king did not know God. That's amazing. Because of one person, a nation can know God. Because of one person, a nation can be saved. Because of one person, the seed that is promised to Abraham, that Jesus Christ would come out of the tribe of Judah, is saved. My goodness, that's amazing. All because Joseph knew that the Lord was with him, did not give up, did not sin against God. And when that woman said, "Lie with me," Joseph makes a statement. Most of us know it. He says, "How can I lie with you? How can I sin against my God? I'm not going to do that. I know who I belong to." We sing this song called "I Know Who My Redeemer Is." Do we live it? Do we know it? We can know it through the example of Joseph. Joseph forgave his brothers. In fact, we know that they lived because here in Exodus, in verses 6, and Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But because a new king arose and did not know Joseph, that king did not know God. I think that's really amazing. It humbles me to know that because Joseph did not sin against God, because Joseph went through the fire, because Joseph endured all these many things, but even though he went through those many things, God was right here. He did not complain. And because he did not complain, everywhere that Joseph went, he was a leader. Joseph was the leader in his household with his father and his brothers. He went to Egypt and was the captain of Potiphar's household. Went to prison and was the captain of the prison. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord blessed Joseph in all those aspects of his life. And when he gets out of prison, he gets put back at the top for a purpose, and that is to save the tribes of Judah, to save and to keep God's promise that God promised Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. Out of your son's seed, the Messiah will come. And the Messiah came. And the Messiah did many, many great things because we know this. And because of that promise, we see Moses. And because of that promise, we see David. And because of Joseph, we see King Solomon. And after King Solomon, we see Jesus. And we get the New Testament. So today, how can we apply this? Well, it's kind of hard to apply something, such a thing as great as this. Because this is Joseph's many dreams. This is Joseph who was chosen. And it's kind of hard to live up to that standard. But this is how you can have faith. God kept his promise to you. God kept his promise through Joseph so that Jesus Christ would come and forgive you of your sins. A lot of people ask me, I haven't got baptized, I don't think God really cares. And I go, yes, he does. Let's talk about Joseph all the way in Genesis. Talk about why you were meant to come and be redeemed through Jesus' blood if you choose so. Let me talk about a man named Joseph who did all these things so that you can have a chance. Let me talk about a man named Joseph in Genesis that helped God keep his promise to you and to me. So that one day when I'm baptized and I go through the death, burial, and resurrection of God, I know that God kept his promise, not just to me, but to the world and to his children through Joseph and through Christ. So that I can know that when I read this Bible, I'm not just reading fantasies and fables and fairy tales, but I'm reading a promise that God made for you and for me through Joseph all the way in Genesis. All the way in Genesis, God had you in mind. All the way in Genesis, God made a plan. All the way in Genesis, God started setting up provisions so that you don't have to die in eternal punishment. So that you could be saved through his Son. So that the world might see the light and not see darkness. Everyone has a story, and everyone's story is important. But the most important story is the story of our Jesus Christ, which everyone can be a part of. If you have not had a chance to come and proclaim the Lord as your Savior, you have the chance to do that this morning. You have the chance to do that this morning or as soon as you can. Because we all know that tomorrow is not promised. But we know that God does keep his promise when we trust and obey. So if any have